This is a review of the Skyzone Cobra X FPV goggles. If you're not familiar with these, they're probably some of the most premium box goggles you can buy. They cost around $220 as of the time of this review. But they offer a few interesting features and things that you don't normally find on box goggles that might actually make them worth that price. In this review, I'm going to go through those features, tell you what I think of them, and then show you some flight footage so you can see how they perform in the field. Hopefully, it'll help you decide if these are the goggles for you. First, let's talk about the physical aspect of the goggles. So, the Skyzone Cobra X is a box goggle, and that means that it's going to look a little bit ridiculous. They're not especially compact, although I feel like Skyzone has done a pretty good job of making these look a little bit more sleek or elegant than some other box goggles on the market. You can see here a comparison with a few other sets of goggles. There's a Fat Shark transformer on the left, and you can see that the Skyzone Cobra is a little bit smaller than that, but it's much larger than the slimline goggles there on the right. Those are Fat Shark HD3s, so really no comparison there. But, they're really not that bad. I think that since VR headsets are becoming more of a thing and people are a little bit more used to seeing someone wearing something like that on their head, it's kind of normalized it a little bit, but they do still look a little ridiculous. One really nice thing about the Cobra X is that it is made to work with glasses. So you can see that there's a little bit of a larger cutout on the frame of the goggles, and I was actually able to put these on with my glasses on, which is a pretty big benefit. So normally I would have to take my glasses off, and I'd have to use some sort of diopter insert to be able to see most normal goggles. And with the Cobra X, I don't have to do that. So I can just put them on and immediately see the screen and then take them off when I'm done. And that's a huge benefit. So if you wear glasses, you might be particularly interested in these goggles. In general, these goggles are very comfortable. So Skyzone has included some sort of fake leather material as the padding between the goggles and your face. And I definitely found it to be more comfortable and perhaps importantly cooler than most other padding that you see on these types of goggles. So that was a really nice benefit. I didn't have any problems having them on my head. They didn't tire me out. There's even a fan included in them to keep you cool and keep the goggles from fogging up. So, really no complaints at all with that. And once you put the goggles on, the screen is really pretty impressive. I think that's one thing that box goggles do really well, is that the screen is usually larger and more immersive than what you would get from, like a smaller Fat Shark style goggle or something else. And this screen's no exception. So on the Cobra X, it's a 720p screen, and I found it to be crisp and plenty large enough and bright enough. And I mean, really, it's a very nice experience using that screen. So, that's one of the most important things about a set of goggles is what does the image itself look like. And I felt like the screen on these goggles was really, really good. So that was definitely a point in favor of the Cobra X. Let's also talk about the power options. Like most goggles, you've got several different ways you can power these. There's a DC barrel jack and an included connector to connect an XT60. So if you wanted to use a drone battery to power it, you can do that. There's also a USB-C port. So if you have one of those portable power banks, you could power it off of one of those. So that's cool. And finally, there's a built-in battery bay that holds one 18650 cell. So if you wanted to just have an internal battery and not mess with anything else, you can do that. Now, one thing I will say is that I found using that internal battery bay, I really was not getting very good battery life. I don't know what it was. I'm not sure if it's the DVR or the module or the screen or some combination of those things, but I found myself having to change the battery pretty much every time I went out to fly. So that was pretty annoying. Now, you could solve this in a few ways. You could use a drone battery, as I said. What I ended up doing was getting one of the Fat Shark 18650 boxes, so that actually holds 2 cells, and then I used an extension cable to run that down to my pocket. And so that had a couple of advantages. One is that the battery lasts a lot longer when you have 2 cells. You get about twice as much battery life. And the other advantage is that it took some weight off of my head. So I was able to take that battery out of the internal bay and move that weight down off of my head. So I felt like that was a pretty good solution to the problem. But it is a little annoying. I wish the battery life was better. It'd be really cool if you could get, 2 hours of battery life out of these, but that's just not the case. So that's one little black mark against these goggles. Next, we'll talk about the menus. So I think this is something that Skyzone does really well. If you look at the controls on the Cobra X, it's very similar to Skyzone's more premium goggles, like the O4X. So you've got these little thumb wheels that you can click through menu options or even to select channel and band. And then those thumb wheels actually press in to select items. And this is a really, really nice system to use. So I think that this is a big benefit to these goggles, is that the menus are intuitive and easy to navigate with those controls. Now, I don't think you should buy goggles based on the menu system. That's probably one of the least important things, but it's a nice touch, and I'm glad they did a good job on this. Powering up the goggles is fast. You don't have to wait a very long time before you can use them. That's nice. I will say that the DVR takes a few seconds to initialize, especially if you have a large card installed on the DVR. And I definitely missed recording a flight or two because I would turn the goggles on and immediately hit the DVR record button and then take off. And in those cases, the DVR just didn't start recording. So definitely something to be aware of. If you are using these goggles, you want to make sure that you give that card a few seconds to initialize, and then when you press the record button, make sure it actually starts recording before you take off. So not a big problem, but just something to be aware of. Next, we're going to talk about the module, and this is probably the single most defining feature of the Cobra X. Unlike pretty much every other box goggle, the Cobra X includes an external module bay, which means that you can swap in whatever type of video receiver module you want. It's a really cool feature, and it makes these goggles a little bit more future-proof and upgradable than most box goggles you might buy. What's also interesting is that the included module is the Skyzone Steady View module, which is a mixing style module, and that's another feature that you wouldn't normally see on box goggles, and it should give us a little bit better of a signal. I'm going to be really interested to try that out and see how that works in real life. I will say there's a couple of quirks about how the module is implemented on these goggles. One is that it's mounted in a strange way. So you can see that the module is mounted on the top of the goggles in a horizontal way rather than on the front in a vertical orientation like you'd see on most other module-capable goggles. That means that if you're mounting antennas on that module, you might need a right angle adapter to make those antennas sit in the correct orientation. I wish this wasn't necessary, and it would have really been better if they had just mounted the module on the front like every other type of goggle, but I guess I'm just glad that there's a module at all. You can also see here that the plastic cover over the module is definitely a custom design for these goggles, and that means that if you wanted to add a third-party module like a rapid fire or something similar, you'd probably have to 3D print a cover or figure something else out to cover that module. And so that's a little bit unfortunate to see. But what we really care about is how this module actually works and what it's like to use it. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at some flight footage and let you see what that signal is actually like. As we look at this footage, I want you to keep in mind that you're also getting to see the DVR in these goggles. I think the DVR is a really important aspect of goggles. I think it's useful to be able to record your flights so you can learn, and it's also really fun to be able to share the cool moments from your flights. So I think that that's something that you should care about when you buy goggles, and I think that Cobra has a pretty good DVR. This first clip is just a general flying clip so you can get an idea of what the footage looks like as a whole. This is a Emax Tiny Hawk 2 Freestyle. I believe it has a Runcam Nano 2. And this looks pretty good to me. So I like the colors. I feel like it's clear and easy to see the footage, and I'm really pretty happy with this DVR. You're going to notice at least one point in this video, you'll see the screen kind of dim out a little bit or get a little bit dark. That's a pretty interesting thing that I noticed several times throughout these clips, and I'm interested to look into that more. So look for a future video on that. I don't think it's a big problem, but it's just something to be aware of with how this module performs. And again, I'm very happy with the way this footage looks. You can look at the sky and look at the ground, and you can see that the colors are well saturated and everything looks really good. So pretty happy with the DVR. This second clip is going to be a bit of a range test. Now this is a different drone and its FPV camera is pretty terrible, so just ignore that aspect of things. But I wanted to show you what kind of range you could expect to get out of these goggles, at least in this situation. You can see here that I'm starting from where I start to lose signal, and although I don't lose it completely, it starts kind of cutting out a little bit, and so I turn back. And I'm just going to fly back to where I started so that you can get an idea of what kind of range that is. And so right here, I'm highlighting, you can see where I was sitting whenever I was doing this flight. So pretty happy with that range. It makes sense that it would start cutting out when I go behind the building, but you know, it's pretty decent range, and I don't think I could have done that with my previous sets of goggles, so I was pretty happy with that. And I'll also go over and show you the other side just so you can get an idea of another spot where I might start to lose signal. And again, I'm not going to wait until it completely cuts out, but just kind of waiting a few, getting pretty close there and seeing what it looks like. And again, you can see this is where I was sitting for that shot. So in this third test, I'm comparing the Cobra X against a cheaper set of box goggles. I happen to have a set of Beta FPV goggles that do have diversity, but I wanted to see how they stacked up against the steady view module in the Cobra X. I put the same cheap dipole antennas on both goggles, and I set the Beta FPV goggles right next to me while I was doing this test, and just started both of them recording and went for a flight. And almost immediately, you can see a huge difference here. In fact, the Beta FPV would have been pretty much unflyable throughout this entire flight. You can see that the Cobra X maintains the signal the whole way. It never becomes unflyable. And in contrast, the Beta FPV is constantly struggling to keep signal. It's turning black and white. It's jumping around. And this would have been extremely difficult to fly with, to the point of not being able to do it. So this was a pretty interesting test. One thing I want to point out in the Cobra X footage is that you can see that the image never rolls or jumps. And I think that's really important for actually being able to fly and having an enjoyable experience with a set of goggles. Unlike the Beta FPV, you can see that the Cobra X just maintains a steady signal, and even when it does start to cut out, it's still totally flyable. It'll turn black and white and there'll be some static, but you can still see the outline of obstacles and you can still just keep on going. So this is a really great result. And honestly for me, this was the test that proved to me that the Cobra X was a good purchase. I was really happy with this performance, and I felt like it gave me more enjoyment of this area than I would have gotten with my previous goggles. So I think that that's kind of telling as to the value of these goggles and the value of the module. This was a really good test to see, and I was really happy with that performance. Overall, I was pretty happy with the steady view module in the Cobra X. You know, it's not perfect, but I felt like it was pretty good, and I definitely felt like it was the best video performance I've seen out of box goggles. And that's really the story of the Cobra X as a whole. They offer really, really good performance and a really good set of features. They're comfortable, they work with glasses, they've got a great screen, great menus, great DVR, great video signal. Really, there's a lot to like about them, and I think that for $220, they offer a pretty good value. But they are still box goggles. They won't be quite as small and compact. You know, they're definitely large and bulky and look a little ridiculous. And you're going to miss out on some premium features that you'd get from other goggles. You're not going to get an OLED screen with the Cobra X. So, you know, it makes it a little bit of a hard decision. I do think that these goggles offer a significant increased value over some of the other box goggles, you know, at like a $50 or $100 price point. These are way better than that. And so I think that they could be a good purchase for you, but you might also have a hard time spending this much for box goggles. And so it's up to you. Maybe that set of features is worth the price, and maybe it's not. But that's going to do it for this review. I hope you guys found it helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.